The Miami heat pressed against Simone's skin like a living warning as she stood in the marble foyer of the Kim estate, her wedding dress rustling with each shallow breath she took. 23 years old, and this was supposed to be her fairy tale. Instead, her fingers trembled as she adjusted the pearl-encrusted bodice, her ears catching voices drifting from the library down the hall. She hadn't intended to listen. She'd been searching for her makeup artist, lost in this maze of luxury that would become her cage. But hearing Junho's voice, her husband-to-be, that deep commanding tone she'd only heard twice before, made her freeze mid-step. She's not what I wanted. She was never part of my plan. The Korean words hit differently than if he'd spoken English. Colder. More final. Hey besties, welcome to another heart-stopping Mafia romance story that will have you swooning from start to finish. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I really hope you join the family. If not, please hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means everything to me. Simone pressed herself against the cool wall, her elaborate updo suddenly unbearable. The white lace veil trailing behind her felt like mockery. Then why proceed with this, young'un? That was Dae-young, Junho's second-in-command, the man who delivered the marriage contract to her father like it was a Tesla lease agreement. Her father controls the Atlanta shipping corridors, Junho replied, and Simone could picture him perfectly, though she couldn't see him. 38 years old, jet black hair always impeccably styled, a face that could have been carved from stone. Dark eyes that had assessed her exactly twice during their month-long engagement, both times evaluating her like an Amazon product with mixed reviews. The Chen family has been expanding into our territory, he continued, his voice dropping lower, and something about the danger in his tone made Simone's pulse quicken. This marriage consolidates power, eliminates competition, and secures the ports her father controls in Savannah. Her father, Vincent Thompson, who had sat her down 4 months ago in his penthouse office and explained that her dreams meant nothing. Her plans to launch her own tech startup in Silicon Valley, her hopes for a life built on her own innovations, her late-night coding sessions building AI tools on platforms like Replit and Cursor, none of it mattered. The Kim family wanted an alliance. She was the down payment. She's attractive enough, another voice chimed in. Simone recognized it as Min-suk, Junho's younger cousin who always looked at her like she was a limited edition Lamborghini he wanted to test drive. Good genetics for heirs. She bit down hard, tasting copper, fighting every instinct to storm into that room and tell them exactly what she thought of being reduced to breeding stock. But she'd been raised in this world. She understood the rules. Women smiled, obeyed, produced children, survived. Attractive isn't what matters in a wife, Junho said, and there was something bitter in his voice, something that made Simone's stomach twist with an emotion she couldn't name. Was it regret? Resignation? I need someone I can trust, someone who understands this life. Not some sheltered girl who thinks organized crime is something romantic from Netflix series. The injustice stole her breath. Sheltered? She'd watched her mother wither away, her light dimming year by year, trapped in a marriage to a man like her father. She'd seen what this life did to women, how it hollowed them until they were nothing but beautiful shells moving through expensive rooms, popping Lexapro just to get through family dinners. She'd spent her entire life preparing to escape, only to be handed to a man who commanded even more fear than her father. What happens after the wedding? Dae-young asked, and Simone found herself leaning closer despite knowing she shouldn't, her heart hammering so hard she thought they might hear it. She gets the East Wing. She can have whatever she wants, Junho dismissed, his tone so casual it felt like a physical slap. As long as she stays out of my business and gives me an heir within the year, she can install all the Philips Hue lights and Google Nest systems she wants. I don't care. Something inside Simone fractured. Not her heart. She'd never been naive enough to expect love from an arranged marriage in their world. But her dignity, her sense of self, the stubborn part of her that had hoped for basic human respect, maybe even partnership. You're cold, young, Min-suk laughed, the sound grating against her ears like nails on a chalkboard. At least pretend to desire her tonight. I'll fulfill my obligation. Nothing more. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Simone didn't wait to hear the rest. She gathered her Vera Wang skirts and ran, the sound of her Jimmy Choo heels on marble echoing through empty hallways. Her vision blurred, but she refused to cry. Not yet. Not where anyone could see. The powder room was mercifully empty. She locked the door and gripped the sink, staring at her reflection in the restoration hardware mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, professional makeup by a celebrity artist highlighting her mother's Eritrean features. Dark eyes usually bright with determination now dull with resignation. Full lips painted with MAC Ruby Woo lipstick. A bride. A commodity. A strategic asset. Her phone vibrated. Kiana, her younger sister, the only person who understood what it meant to be born into this world without choosing it. 5 minutes until you need to walk. Are you ready? Ready? Was she ready to marry a man who didn't want her? Who saw her as nothing more than a business acquisition logged into some irritable database? Who planned to fulfill his obligation and nothing more? Her shaking fingers typed back, "Need 3 more minutes." She pulled out the small bottle of Xanax her therapist had prescribed, Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the Mindfulness Therapy Center in Coral Gables. She'd been seeing her secretly for months, using a burner iPhone and paying cash through Venmo under a fake name. She dry swallowed half a pill, knowing she needed the edge taken off, but couldn't afford to be completely numb. Not today. A sharp knock made her jump, the pill catching in her throat. Simone. Her father's voice, rough with impatience and too much aged scotch. "What are you doing?" "The ceremony begins in 5 minutes." She smoothed her clothes, checked her makeup with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to hide their emotions early, and unlocked the door. Vincent Thompson filled the doorway, his broad chest straining against his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his face flushed from expensive Macallan 25-year whiskey. "You look pale," he observed, eyes narrowing with that predatory assessment she'd learned to fear as a child. "Are you ill?" "Just nervous," she lied, her acting skills honed from years of pretending everything was fine at charity galas and family dinners. Because telling him she'd overheard her future husband's contempt would accomplish nothing. Her father didn't care about her feelings. He cared about the alliance, the power, the territory expansion this marriage would bring to his empire. Nothing to be nervous about. He offered his arm and she took it because she had no choice, because saying no had never been an option in the Thompson family. Kim Junho is a powerful man. You're fortunate to be marrying him. Fortunate. The word tasted like ash mixed with the Xanax dissolving in her system. As they walked toward the private garden where 200 guests waited, Simone caught glimpses of her future. Armed guards at every corner, their eyes constantly scanning, hands resting on concealed Glock 19s. Servers offering Cristal champagne worth more than most people earned in months. Women dripping in Cartier love bracelets and Tiffany diamond necklaces, their smiles as fake as their compliments. Men conducting business deals between toasts, their hands stained with blood no amount of Aesop hand soap could wash clean. This was her future. This was her life. The garden gates opened and the string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon in D. Every head turned to watch her walk down the aisle on her father's arm. She kept her spine straight, her chin high, her expression serene, everything she'd learned from those YouTube videos on posture and presence she'd watched late at night when insomnia kept her company. Years of training in how to be the perfect Mafia wife were paying off, even if everything inside her screamed to run. And there at the altar stood Kim Junho. 6'2" of controlled power, his black Armani suit fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders and lean frame. His black hair was immaculate, styled with what she recognized as uppercut deluxe pomade. She'd noticed it in photos online when she desperately Googled everything about him after the engagement announcement, falling down rabbit holes at 3 a.m. His face was expressionless as he watched her approach, but something flickered in his eyes. Was it regret? Longing? Or just her desperate imagination? Those dark eyes met hers, and she searched desperately for some warmth, some sign that what she'd overheard was just wedding anxiety, maybe even a defense mechanism to protect himself. She found nothing but cold assessment, like she was a quarterly report he was reviewing. The ceremony passed in a blur. She heard herself repeating vows she didn't mean, each word feeling like a betrayal of the girl she used to be. Felt Junho's fingers cool against hers as he slipped on the wedding band, a Harry Winston platinum band with embedded diamonds that probably cost more than a McLaren. Tasted champagne when he kissed her with all the passion of a business transaction being finalized, his lips barely brushing hers for exactly 2.5 seconds before he pulled away, leaving her cold. The guests applauded. Someone made a toast about new beginnings and powerful alliances. The quartet played something upbeat and celebratory. And through it all, she felt nothing but a growing numbness spreading through her chest, even as the Xanax tried to smooth the edges of her panic, even as she wondered how she'd survive this marriage. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, all Swarovski crystal chandeliers and imported Italian Calicut marble. Simone smiled until her face ached, using techniques she'd learned from a masterclass course on body language and presence. She danced with men whose names she immediately forgot, their expensive cologne, Tom Ford Oud Wood, Creed Aventus, all blending together. She accepted congratulations from women who looked at her with pity and envy, pity because they knew what being married to a man like Junho meant, envy because of the power that came with the Kim name. Junho barely spoke to her. He was always across the room, deep in conversation with other men, conducting business at their wedding reception like she was just another detail that had been handled, another task checked off in his Notion project management board. When he did approach, it was to introduce her to someone important, his hand proprietarily at her waist, but cold, impersonal. "My wife," he would say in English, and the words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he was testing out a new language on Duolingo. "Not my beautiful wife, not the woman I chose, just my wife," stated as fact, devoid of emotion. As midnight approached, Kiana found Simone on the terrace, staring out at the Miami skyline that stretched to the horizon like scattered diamonds. "You look miserable," Kiana said bluntly, pressing a glass of actual Dom Perignon into her sister's hand. Not the moat they'd been serving the lesser guests, but the real thing, the bottles Junho kept for family and close associates. "I am miserable," Simone admitted, because lying to Kiana was pointless. She'd known her too long, seen too much. Her sister was the only person she could be real with. Did something happen? Kiana's dark eyes searched her face with concern that made Simone's throat tighten. Beyond the obvious nightmare of marrying a man you barely know? Simone told her everything she'd overheard, every cold word, every dismissive comment. By the time she finished, Kiana's expression had shifted from concern to fury, her jaw clenched tight. "That bastard," Kiana hissed, her perfectly manicured nails, OPI Lincoln Park after dark, digging into her champagne flute. "I should tell Dad to pull out of the Savannah deal. See how Junho likes losing the East Coast ports." "Don't." Simone gripped her arm, panic flaring. "It'll only make things worse for me. He'll blame me for costing him business, and I'll pay the price." "So, what are you going to do? Spend the rest of your life being treated like an incubator?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. What could she do? Divorce wasn't an option in their world. It would be seen as weakness, as failure. Running would get her killed and probably get her family killed too. This was her life now, for better or worse. Mostly worse. "I'm going to survive," Simone said finally, echoing the mantra her mother had whispered to her countless times before the Ambien and wine finally took her. "Just like every other woman in this life. You deserve better than survival, Simone." Kiana's voice cracked with emotion. "You deserve love, respect, partnership, not this corporate merger disguised as a marriage." "Well, I'm not going to get it from him." Simone drained her champagne, welcoming the burn. "So I'll take what I can get. Security, wealth, protection. Maybe that's enough." Even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. It would never be enough, but it was all she had. The night ended with Junho and Simone being escorted to the master suite by a gaggle of drunk relatives making crude jokes about wedding nights and air production. She kept her smile fixed in place, let them believe whatever they wanted to believe about their romantic union. Finally, the door closed behind them, alone together for the first time. Junho immediately went to the bar, a custom piece with a built-in wine refrigerator, and poured himself 3 fingers of Johnnie Walker Blue Label, downing it in one swallow. Then he poured another and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You can take the guest room if you'd prefer," he said, his tone making it clear he hoped she would. "Or stay here. Your choice." So this was it. The moment where he would fulfill his obligation, nothing more. The moment where she would become truly his in the only way that mattered to men like him. Simone thought about refusing, about demanding the guest room and whatever dignity she could salvage. But then she thought about the overheard conversation, about his dismissive assessment of her as nothing more than a strategic asset, and something stubborn and reckless rose in her chest. "I'll stay," she said, meeting his gaze directly, refusing to look away even though her heart was hammering. "After all, you need an heir within the year, don't you?" His eyes narrowed slightly, the first real reaction she'd gotten from him all day. "You heard that." It wasn't a question. His voice was dangerously quiet. "I heard everything." She turned her back to him, reaching for the zipper of her Vera Wang gown. "I heard how you don't want me. How I'm just a sheltered girl who doesn't understand this life. How you plan to fulfill your obligation and nothing more." The zipper stuck halfway down. She struggled with it for a moment, frustration and humiliation burning through her in equal measure, making her eyes sting. Then he was there, his fingers brushing hers aside, his touch surprisingly gentle as he worked the zipper free. His breath was warm against her neck, his body close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody, probably Dior Sauvage, and feel his heat. "You shouldn't have heard that," he said quietly, and was that regret in his voice? "But I did." She stepped away as soon as the dress was loose, clutching it to her chest like armor. "So let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is, a transaction, an alliance, a means to an end. You get your ports and territory. I get whatever this is." She walked into the bathroom and closed the door, leaning against it as she finally let the tears fall. Silent tears that she quickly wiped away with Kleenex, refusing to let him hear her break. If you're loving this story so far, do me a huge favor and drop a comment telling me what you think will happen next. Will Simone find a way to survive this loveless marriage, or will something unexpected change everything? Hit that like button if you're Team Simone, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. 3 months of marriage, and Junho and Simone had perfected the art of being strangers who shared a last name. He lived in the west wing of the Kim estate, she in the east. They took meals separately, appeared together only when business or social obligations demanded it, and spoke to each other with the distant courtesy of Uber drivers and passengers rather than spouses. The wedding night had been exactly what he'd promised, obligation fulfilled, nothing more. He'd been efficient, almost clinical, like he was completing a task on Asana. And he hadn't touched her since. Simone told herself she didn't care. Told herself the relief she felt at his absence was preference, not rejection. Told herself that building a life around charity work and online courses, she was learning Python on Code Academy, building AI projects on ChatGPT, was enough. She was lying to herself and she knew it. But self-deception was better than acknowledging the hollow ache in her chest every time she saw him across a room, surrounded by men who would die for him, commanding respect and fear with equal ease. Better than admitting that somewhere in the past 3 months, she'd started noticing things. The way his rare smiles transformed his face from severe to devastating. How his hands moved with controlled grace whether he was signing documents or pouring whiskey. The flash of something almost vulnerable in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. She was falling for a man who didn't want her, and it was pathetic. September brought cooler temperatures to Miami, and with it, Daejung's increasingly frequent visits to her wing of the estate. "Mrs. Kim," he'd say, always formal, despite the fact that she'd told him repeatedly to call her Simone. "The boss wants to know if you'll be attending the charity gala tonight at the Perez Art Museum. Or, the boss says you're free to redecorate the library if you'd like. He's approved a budget. Or, the boss noticed you've been walking the gardens alone. He's assigned additional security, 2 former Secret Service agents. Always the boss. Never Junho. Never your husband. It took Simone 2 weeks to realize what was happening. Junho was watching her. Not just through Daejeong's reports, though that was certainly part of it. Through the ring security cameras positioned throughout the estate. Through the guards who shadowed her every move with military precision. Through the staff who reported back to him every detail of her daily routine, what she ate for breakfast, what books she ordered on Amazon, how long she spent on Zoom calls with Kiana. The realization should have angered her. Instead, she found it almost amusing, a small spark of something in the numbness. The man who claimed not to want her was tracking her movements like she was a valuable Tesla he'd left in a questionable neighborhood. "Why does he care what I do?" she asked Daejeong one afternoon as he delivered yet another message about her schedule, this time about a Peloton bike being delivered to her suite. Daejeong's weathered face remained carefully neutral. "The boss takes his responsibilities seriously, ma'am. Your safety is his responsibility." "My safety or my availability?" She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "In case he needs to produce that air he's so concerned about?" Something flickered in Daejeong's eyes. "Respect, maybe?" "Mrs. Kim, if I may speak frankly?" She nodded, curious despite herself. "The boss isn't an easy man to understand," Daejeong said carefully, choosing his words like he was navigating a minefield. "But he's not the man you think he is either." Before she could ask what he meant, her phone buzzed. Kiana, with their weekly lunch date reminder. The restaurant was in neutral territory, Zuma, Miami, an upscale Japanese place in the financial district owned by a family not affiliated with any of the major organizations. Kiana was already seated when Simone arrived, her security detail taking up position at a nearby table, their eyes constantly scanning the room like human surveillance cameras. "You look exhausted," Kiana announced as Simone sat down, her directness one of the things Simone loved most about her. "Not sleeping?" "Not really." She hadn't slept well since the wedding. Her California king bed felt too large and too empty despite her relief at Junho's absence. "He's still keeping his distance?" Kiana didn't need to specify who he was. Simone nodded, focusing on the menu though she already knew what she wanted, the miso black cod she always ordered. Complete radio silence unless he needs his beautiful wife to appear at some function, she said, the words tasting bitter. "Men are idiots," Kiana declared, signaling the waiter. "Especially men in our world. They think showing emotion is weakness, like they're trapped in some toxic masculinity TED Talk." "It's not about emotion," Simone said quietly, her fingers tracing the condensation on her water glass. "He just doesn't want me. He made that clear before we were even married." The waiter arrived with sake, and Kiana waited until he'd left before leaning forward, her expression serious. "Can I tell you something? Something I heard from Dad's associate who works in intelligence." Simone nodded, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "The Chen family is making moves," Kiana said, her voice low. "They've been buying up politicians in Atlanta, bribing cops in Savannah, consolidating power along the East Coast. Dad thinks they're planning something big, maybe even a full territorial takeover." The Chen family. They're rivals. The ones Joon-ho had mentioned when explaining why he was marrying her. Their territory bordered the Kims, and there had been tensions for years. Small skirmishes and proxy wars that never quite erupted into full-scale conflict. "What does that have to do with me?" Simone asked, though a sick feeling was already forming in her stomach. "They know you're Junho's weak spot," Kiana said bluntly, her eyes holding Simone's. "The only thing he actually cares about beyond power and territory. Going after you would be a direct attack on him, a way to destabilize the entire Kim organization." "That's ridiculous." Simone set down her sake glass harder than intended. "He doesn't care about me at all. I'm just a strategic asset logged in some spreadsheet." "Are you sure about that?" Kiana raised an eyebrow, that knowing look she got when she saw something Simone was refusing to see. "Because from what Dad says, Junho's been obsessed with your security since the wedding. Tripled the guards, installed a new ADT security system with AI monitoring, personally vets anyone who gets within 50 feet of you using facial recognition software." The conversation with Daejung suddenly made more sense. Your safety is his responsibility. That's just protecting his investment, Simone argued, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm his wife. It would be a sign of weakness if something happened to me. Keep telling yourself that, Kiana said, but her expression was knowing, like she could see right through Simone's defenses. But maybe pay attention to what he does, not what he says. They finished lunch discussing safer topics, upcoming charity events, Kiana's latest battle with their father over her refusing yet another arranged marriage, her plans to maybe move to New York and start fresh. By the time they parted ways, the afternoon sun was slanting through Miami's glass towers, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Simone's driver, Taemin, was waiting at the curb next to the black Mercedes G-Wagon. But as they pulled away from Zuma, she noticed a black Escalade behind them that hadn't been there before, following at a consistent distance. Taemin, she said quietly, her heart beginning to race, her Apple Watch registering her elevated pulse. Are we being followed? His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and she saw his jaw tighten. Yes, ma'am. Hold on. He accelerated smoothly, weaving through traffic with the skill of someone trained for exactly this situation by professionals. But the Escalade kept pace, matching their every move like it was locked onto them. Simone's phone was already in her hand when it rang, Junho's name flashing on the screen, the first time he'd called her directly in 3 months. Where are you? His voice was clipped, urgent, and was that fear she heard? Leaving lunch with Kiana. Taemin says we're being followed. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it cracked on the last word. I know. We're tracking you on Find My iPhone. Stay on the phone with me. There was something in his voice she'd never heard before, genuine fear, raw and unhidden. Junho. Just stay on the phone, Simone. The use of her name, not Mrs. Kim or some formal title, made her breath catch. Daejung is 2 minutes behind you with backup. Taemin knows the protocol. The Escalade suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside them. She caught a glimpse of tinted windows, of something metallic being raised toward them. Taemin jerked the wheel hard right, and they careened down a side street as the sound of gunfire erupted behind them, actual gunfire, the crack of bullets hitting metal. Simone screamed, dropping the phone, clutching the seat as Taemin drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic. Mrs. Kim. Junho's voice, tiny and distant from where the phone had fallen. Simone. She grabbed for it with shaking hands, her whole body trembling. I'm here. I'm okay. Where's Taemin taking you? His voice was rough, barely controlled. I don't know. Where are we going? She looked out the window, trying to orient herself through the adrenaline flooding her system. Heading toward the warehouse district, Taemin said through gritted teeth, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. More gunfire. Closer this time. The rear window exploded inward, safety glass showering over her like deadly rain. She ducked down, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs, her Apple Watch now screaming warnings about her heart rate. Hold on, ma'am, Taemin said. Almost there. Almost where? She wanted to ask, but then she saw it, one of Junho's properties, a nondescript building that looked like every other warehouse in the district, but was actually one of his most secure locations. The gates opened as they approached, controlled by facial recognition technology, and Taemin gunned the engine, speeding through just as they began to close behind them. The pursuing Escalade slammed into them, unable to follow. Armed guards appeared from every direction, surrounding their car with military precision. And then he was there, Junho, yanking open her door, his face pale beneath his normally tan complexion, his eyes wild with something that looked suspiciously like terror. Are you hurt? His hands were on her, checking for injuries with a thoroughness that belied his usual distance, his fingers trembling slightly. Did they hit you? Talk to me, Simone. I'm fine, she managed, though she was shaking so hard she could barely form words, adrenaline making everything feel surreal. The window broke, but I'm not hurt. He pulled her from the car and into his arms, crushing her against his chest with a force that drove the air from her lungs. She could feel his heart racing, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. Could feel him trembling almost imperceptibly, this powerful man actually shaking. When I saw the tracker deviate from your normal route, he breathed into her hair, his voice raw. When I heard those gunshots over the phone. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. She understood. For the first time since their wedding, Kim Junho was showing her something real. Not the cold businessman, not the ruthless mafia boss, but a man who had been genuinely afraid. Afraid for her. You won't believe what happens next in this story, besties. The tension is about to explode in ways you never saw coming. If you're dying to know whether Simone and Junho can survive what's coming for them, smash that subscribe button right now. Drop a like if you're addicted to this story, and share it with anyone who loves a good mafia romance. The safe house was everything Simone had expected from one of Junho's properties, fortified, luxurious, and utterly isolating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Biscayne Bay, bulletproof glass filtering the late afternoon sun into amber streams across imported marble floors. Guards stationed at every entrance, each one armed with state-of-the-art weapons. Security systems powered by AI that would make a government facility jealous. A gilded cage, just like the estate. But this time, Junho was locked inside it with her. "You'll stay here until we neutralize the threat," he said, pacing the main room like a caged tiger. He'd shed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle and a tattoo she'd never noticed before, Korean characters she couldn't read. His usually immaculate hair was disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "Dae-young is coordinating with our people. The Chen family will pay for this." Simone sat on the leather sofa, still trembling despite the blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, watching him. This Junho was different from the man she'd married, agitated, almost frantic, his legendary control fracturing at the edges. "How long?" she asked quietly. "As long as it takes." He stopped pacing, his dark eyes finally meeting hers. "Days, weeks, however long until I'm certain you're safe." "So I'm a prisoner again." His jaw tightened. "You're protected." "There's a difference." "Is there?" She pulled the blanket tighter, suddenly cold despite the climate control. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels pretty similar." Something dangerous flashed across his face. He crossed to the bar, a custom piece with built-in refrigeration and smart technology, poured himself 3 fingers of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon, then reconsidered and poured a second glass. He brought it to her, pressing it into her hands. "Drink," he ordered. "You're still shaking." She was. Her hands trembled so badly the amber liquid rippled in the Waterford crystal glass. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the horrifying realization of how close she'd come to dying. "They were shooting at me," she said, the words feeling distant, like they belonged to someone else's story. "Those were real bullets. Real guns. Not movie props." "I know." Junho sat beside her, closer than he'd been since their wedding night, close enough that she could smell his cologne Dior Sauvage mixed with something uniquely him. "This is my fault." She looked at him sharply. "Your fault. I should have anticipated this." His hands clenched into fists, his Rolex catching the light. "The Chens have been making moves for months. I knew they were getting bolder, more aggressive. I should have increased your security sooner, should have kept you closer." "Kept me locked in the estate permanently?" The bourbon burned going down, but she welcomed it, needed something to ground her in reality. "If that's what it took to keep you safe, yes." His voice was raw with something she couldn't identify. "I'm not a possession to be guarded, Junho." She set down the glass before she dropped it. "I'm a person. A person who almost died today because of a war I didn't choose, because of alliances I had no say in. A person who almost died because of me," he said quietly. "Because you're my wife. The Chens didn't target you randomly, Simone. They targeted you to hurt me, to show weakness in the Kim organization." The word hung between them, loaded with meanings they'd both been avoiding for 3 months. "Why do you care?" The question escaped before she could stop it, all her confusion and hurt and anger pouring out. "You made it clear before we were even married that you didn't want me, that I was just a strategic asset. Another property in your portfolio, like this safe house or the warehouse district." His head snapped toward her, shock written plainly across his features. "What?" "I heard you," she continued, 3 months of pain finally breaking through her carefully constructed walls. The day of the wedding. You were in the library with Daejung and Min-suk. You said you didn't want me, that you needed someone you could trust, not some sheltered girl who thought organized crime was romantic. That I was just a means to secure ports and territory. Junho's face had gone completely white, all the color draining away. You heard that conversation? Every word. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away despite the burning in her eyes. So forgive me if I'm confused about why you're suddenly so concerned about my safety. You're just protecting your investment, right? He stood abruptly, turning his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at Biscayne Bay as the sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, his reflection ghost-like in the bulletproof glass. Do you want to know why I said those things? His voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath she heard something brittle, something breaking. The real reason? Enlighten me. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it cracked. He turned, and the expression on his face stole her breath. Pain, raw and unhidden. The mask he wore so carefully completely stripped away, leaving behind something vulnerable and terrifying. Because I was scared, he said simply, his accent thicker with emotion. I took one look at you when your father first brought you to discuss the arrangement, and I was terrified. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. Her heart was doing something strange in her chest. Terrified of what? Of you. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers, and she saw something in them she'd never seen before, honesty, raw and unfiltered. Of what you made me feel. I'd spent 15 years in this life building walls, making sure I cared about nothing and no one because caring makes you weak, makes you vulnerable, makes you a target. He was close enough now that she could see the pulse hammering in his throat, could feel the heat radiating from his body. And then there you were, he continued, the words spilling out like he'd been holding them back for too long, like a dam finally breaking. With your intelligent eyes and stubborn chin, looking at me like you could see through every defense I'd built. Like you could see the man underneath the monster. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. Junho. I wanted you from the first moment I saw you, he interrupted, his voice rough. Not just physically, though God, yes, that too. But I wanted to hear you laugh. Wanted to know what made you angry, what made you happy, what you coded late at night on your laptop. Wanted things I had no business wanting from a marriage that was supposed to be purely strategic. So you decided to hurt me first, she said, the accusation coming out sharper than she'd intended, years of self-protection making her defensive. To make sure I knew my place before I could get any foolish ideas. I decided to protect myself, he corrected, running a hand through his hair, messing it up further. And in doing so, I hurt you. Hurt us both. Because these past 3 months have been hell, Simone. Living in the same house with you, seeing you every day, knowing I destroyed any chance we might have had before we even began. She stood, her legs shaky but holding. You're telling me that all this time, the distance, the coldness, treating me like furniture, it was because you wanted me too much? I'm telling you that I'm a coward, he said flatly, self-loathing thick in his voice. I'm telling you that I chose fear over honesty, and it nearly cost you your life today. Nearly cost me the only thing that's mattered in 15 years. He moved closer, and she could see the desperation in his eyes, the fear, the longing. When I got the alert that you were being followed, he said, his voice rough with emotion. When I heard those gunshots over the phone, when I thought, he stopped, swallowed hard. I realized something. I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anything happen to you. I would destroy every rival, eliminate every threat, sacrifice everything I've built if it meant keeping you safe. Junho, her voice was barely a whisper. Let me finish. His hands found hers, warm and solid and trembling slightly. I don't want a strategic asset, Simone. I don't want a trophy wife or an air producer. I want you. The woman who glares at me across the dinner table when she's forced to attend my business meetings. The woman who turned the East Wing into a coding lab out of pure spite. The woman who has more courage in her little finger than most of my men have in their entire bodies. Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. You have a strange way of showing it. I know. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, the touch sending electricity through her nervous system. And I know I have no right to ask this after everything I've done, but Simone, give me a chance. Let me prove that I can be more than the cold bastard you married. Let me show you that this marriage could be real. She thought about the past 3 months. The loneliness, the rejection, the hollow ache of living with a man who treated her like an Alexa device he occasionally needed to interact with. But she also thought about Daejong's words, "He's not the man you think he is." About the tripled security, the obsessive tracking of her movements, the fear in Junho's voice when she'd been attacked. Actions, not words. What had Kiana said? Pay attention to what he does, not what he says. I need guarantees, she said finally, watching hope flare in his eyes like sunrise. I won't be kept in the dark about your business anymore. If I'm a target because I'm your wife, then I deserve to know what I'm up against. Full transparency. Agreed. He nodded immediately. I want to be your partner, not your possession, she continued, gaining confidence. That means I get a voice in decisions that affect us both. Real input, not just lip service. Agreed. And I want the truth, Junho. Always. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath on her face. No more protection through deception. No more lies, even kind ones. If you're going to do something dangerous, I want to know. If there's a threat, I want to be informed. No more treating me like I'm fragile. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. I can do that. On one condition. What? You give me the same honesty. His hands tightened on hers. Tell me what you need from me. Tell me when I'm failing you. Tell me if, he swallowed hard, vulnerability written across his features. Tell me if you can ever forgive me for how this started. She studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or strategy. But all she saw was raw vulnerability, something she'd never seen in the 3 months they'd been married. A man who had just handed her the power to destroy him. I heard something else that day, she said quietly. Something you might not remember saying. His brow furrowed. What? Minsuk asked if you'd pretend to want me on our wedding night. And you said you'd fulfill your obligation, nothing more. She watched his eyes close, pain etching lines around his mouth. But here's what I've realized over these 3 months. She freed one hand to cup his jaw, feeling the roughness of 5 o'clock shadow, the warmth of his skin. You were lying then, too, she said softly. You were lying to them and to yourself. Because that night, when you touched me, it wasn't cold. It wasn't clinical. You were holding back so hard, trying so desperately not to feel anything, that it was almost painful to watch. His eyes opened, and she saw her own realization reflected there, recognition, longing, fear. I was terrified I'd lose control, he admitted, his voice hoarse. That I'd show you how much I wanted you and you'd use it against me. Use it as leverage, as a weapon the way people in our world do. I'm not interested in weapons, Junho. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched, until she could feel the tremor running through his body. I'm interested in truth. And the truth is, I've spent 3 months trying to hate you. Trying to convince myself that the hollow ache in my chest was relief, not loneliness. Trying to pretend I didn't notice every time you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. You noticed? His voice was barely a whisper. I noticed everything. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I noticed how you always made sure my favorite tea was stocked, that specific Harney and Sons blend I like. How the temperature in my wing was always perfect because you'd adjusted the Nest system personally. How you convinced the Perez Art Museum to give me that private access even though you claimed to hate modern art. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I do hate modern art. And yet you arranged unlimited access because I mentioned once that I missed it. Her hand slid from his jaw to the back of his neck. Because seeing me happy made the suffering worthwhile. They were so close now she could feel his breath on her lips, could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could feel the tremor running through his powerful frame. If we do this, she said softly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the ocean outside. If we try to make this marriage real, there's no going back. No more separate wings. No more distance. No more pretending we don't affect each other. No more distance, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Starting now. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like their wedding night. This kiss was desperate, hungry, 3 months of denied want pouring into it. His hands framed her face with a reverence that made her heart ache, his lips moving against hers like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning in shallow water. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer, 3 months of loneliness and longing finally finding release. The blanket fell away, forgotten, as he lifted her from the sofa, his arms banding around her like he was afraid she might disappear into smoke. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers, his eyes closed. "I don't deserve you," he murmured, his accent thick with emotion. "But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to." "Good," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Because I'm not an easy woman to love, Kim Junho. I'm stubborn and independent, and I'm going to challenge you every single day." "Good," he agreed, a real smile transforming his face from severe to devastating. "Because I'm not an easy man to love either. I'm controlling and overprotective, and I'm going to drive you crazy. We'll figure it out together." The word felt like a promise and a revelation, like the beginning of something she'd stopped believing was possible. "Together," he repeated, testing the word. Then his expression shifted, the ruthless Mafia boss emerging again. "But first, we need to talk about the Chens." She nodded, settling back onto the sofa, but this time he sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "What's the plan?" "Dae-young is tracking their movements. We know they're operating out of a facility in Hialeah, using encrypted communications on Signal, but our people intercepted some chatter." His fingers traced absent patterns on her arm. "They were testing our defenses, seeing how close they could get to you. If they'd succeeded today. But they didn't." She covered his hand with hers. "Thanks to Taemin and your security protocols and that obsessive tracking you've been doing." "I'm not going to apologize for that," he said firmly. "Not when it saved your life." "I'm not asking you to." She looked up at him. "But I want to be involved in the response. I want to know the plan, understand the strategy. If this is my life now, if I'm going to be a target, then I need to be informed, not protected through ignorance." He studied her for a long moment, and she could see him struggling with his protective instincts, warring with his promise to treat her as a partner. "The Chens made a mistake today," he finally said. "They showed their hand too early, got impatient. We can use that. Dae-young is setting up a meeting with the other families, everyone who has a stake in maintaining peace in Miami and Atlanta. We're going to present evidence of the Chen family's aggression, their attempts to destabilize our territories." "And then what?" she asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "And then we give them a choice." His voice went cold, the temperature in the room seeming to drop. "Pull back and accept reduced territory as penance, or face a united front. Every family in Florida and Georgia, all coming for them at once." It was strategic, ruthless, and probably the smartest play. Isolate the Chens, make them the enemy of everyone, force them to back down without an all-out war that would cost lives and attract federal attention. "When is this meeting?" she asked. 2 days. At the Fontainebleau neutral territory, public enough that no one will try anything stupid. He paused. "I want you there." She looked at him sharply. "You want me at a meeting of crime families?" "I want them to see that you're not just my wife," he said. "You're my partner. Untouchable. And anyone who threatens you threatens all of us." His hand tightened on her shoulder. "It sends a message, Simone. About us, about our alliance, about what happens to people who target the Kim family." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "What is it?" she asked. Dae-young found something. He stood, pulling up information on his phone, some kind of encrypted app she didn't recognize, maybe Telegram or Wick. "One of the shooters from today. They got him on traffic camera footage near Zuma, tracked him back to a warehouse in Hialeah." "Is he talking?" she asked, and was surprised by how calm her voice sounded, how quickly she was adapting to this world of violence and strategy. "He will be." Junho's voice was cold, final. "I need to handle this. Will you be okay here? The safe house is secure, and I'll leave 6 guards stationed outside." Part of her wanted to tell him not to go, to stay here in this bubble where they'd finally been honest with each other. But she'd asked to be his partner, which meant understanding that some things couldn't wait. Go, she said. Do what you need to do. She stood, moving to him. Come back to me. In one piece. No unnecessary risks. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the cold violence she knew he was about to commit. Always, he promised against her lips. I'll always come back to you. After he left, Simone stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun set over Biscayne Bay, turning the water into liquid gold. Her reflection stared back at her, Simone Thompson Kim, no longer just a pawn in her father's games or a strategic asset in her husband's empire. She was something new. Something more. A partner. A force to be reckoned with. And the Chen family was about to learn that threatening her had been their biggest mistake. This is it, besties, the moment everything changes. If you've made it this far, you're officially part of our family, and I couldn't be more grateful. Drop a comment telling me if you think Simone and Junho can survive what's coming next, because trust me, the next chapter is going to be absolutely explosive. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and share this with anyone who loves a good enemies to lovers Mafia romance. Your girl has so much more content coming, and you don't want to miss a single second. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous love stories are the ones worth fighting for.